Hi, my name's gwEm and welcome back to my YouTube channel, the gwEmbassy. So I did a little ad hoc upload outside of my normal schedule, which was a jam with the new Korg SQ-64 that I was very excited to get. Let's get into it and I'll talk a little bit at the end as well. Right, so let's break down the jam that I did with my new Korg SQ-64 sequencer. Now the reason I got this is because a couple of years ago I had a Arturia BeatStep Pro and I sold it because there was a few things that I didn't like about it. So first of all, you couldn't configure the MIDI notes that corresponded to each drum on the unit. You had to use an app, which was fair enough, but kind of when you're in the zone, I didn't really want to mess around with that. And the second reason is that it didn't really support chords. So I went back to using the Alesis MMT8, as you know, but when I saw that this was being announced, I was very excited and I got a pre-order in. And it finally arrived the second to last week of February 2021, and it's here. Now, my initial impressions of the Korg SQ-64 are a little bit guarded, I would say. There are some bugs in the firmware, but it is already far more my style than the Arturia BeatStep, and I am happy with it. Although it would have been nice if some of these firmware bugs could be fixed, and I'm sure they will be in a later release. There's no showstoppers because clearly I was able to make the jam. So I'll mute everything except for track A. The SQ-64 has 4 tracks, A, B, C and D is a drum track, and then you can have 16 individual drums. Anyway, track A is a melodic track, and as a test I've connected the CV gate to my Roland MC-202. And here is the bass line that I made with the MC-202. That's a very prominent saw, and I've put a bit of sub-oscillator in as well to fatten it up, and just a hair of reverb. Now there's something quite odd that I noticed when I was sequencing the MC-202. The tuning of the CV gate was a little bit off. I mean, it's easy to correct. I could correct it on the MC-202, or there's also a correction on the Korg itself, but I thought that was a bit strange for a modern piece of gear. And the MC-202 is in tune with my Arturia keystep. So I got my multimeter out and I did measure the output, and believe it or not, that it is actually slightly out of calibration for the CV gate, which was a real surprise. I didn't expect that. Perhaps Korg will release some kind of calibration later. But I had to use a calibration of minus 0.05 volts to get C0, which should be 0 volts. It is on my Arturia keystep, as I say, to actually be 0 volts. Anyway, let's go on to the second track. B is a string sound that I made on the JP-8080. Let's have a listen to that. A little bit of super saw on the JP-8080, but I tried to make it subtle. I didn't want it to sound too trancey. I wanted to have chords to test out the chord feature of the Korg SQ-64 because, you know, was a big selling point for me. And I was pretty pleased actually with how chords worked. It's not even too bad recording them in step time or in real time. You've got this, if you press pitch and then your track number, you get like a little keyboard where you can play notes And it's cool that they've got that clearly, but I did prefer the the real deal. Let's go on to the next track, which is on the second timbre of the JP-8080. It's kind of a synth arpeggio. The MIDI clock syncs the LFO and the delay on that, and it's just a simple pattern. I was going to make it a lot more complicated, that arpeggio, but when I just played that simple test pattern, it would fit really well, so I just went with that. The MIDI output of the SQ-64 is with these small mini jack connections, which is very modern. A little bit stingy of Korg not to include any adapters in the package for the SQ-64. I had to get some separately, although it does have 2 MIDI outs, which is quite good. I'm going through this Philip Rees MIDI through box. With this lead I got on eBay, it goes directly into the through box from the SQ-64. To me it feels perfectly fine using that type of jack. It's also got a sync in and sync out, and I was amazed and delighted to find that you can configure those sync outputs to be Roland Sync 24 standard. So in the future I'll be able to hook this up to the 303 or the 707 or something like that. And again, you do need an adapter lead. A little bit harder to find those than the MIDI ones, but they are out there online. Let's go on to the drum track. Now for the drums, I decided to use the good old Boss Dr. Rhythm 550 Mk2. The kick drum out is hard panned to the left output on this white lead, and that goes directly into the mixer for its own processing. And all the other sounds are hard panned to the right, and they go through this Boss CS3 compressor pedal. CS3 is a rather harsh sounding compressor. It's made for guitars really. You get super squeezed drums and it does sound kind of cool. I'll introduce the drums gradually. So first of all, the kick drum. Now, as I say, everything except for the kick drum is going through this compressor, so I'll just show you how savage that sounds. I'll turn off the kick, leave the other drum sounds, and I'll just toggle the compressor on and off. It's really squashing those sounds. It sounds kind of gritty and cool. I like it. I wouldn't normally put that much compression on, but it just seemed to work for this track. Yeah, it works really nicely. As I say, you had to be aware of some little issues still with the SQ-64. Like I say, I was very surprised to find that the CV gate output was not calibrated. And there are some little bugs here and there in the firmware, which I'm hoping Korg will iron out. So that's the jam with the Korg SQ-64. I'm pretty pleased with it. There's a few things that I'd like to see improved, but I will be definitely using it in more jams. Please consider liking and subscribing to the gwEm, that would be great. I hope to see you in another video soon. Until then, take care.